Welcome to episode 7 of Greeting Moshiach. In this episode, we are going to continue the conversation and get a little more background into the Sikha of Chai Sar Nun Beis, and where the Rebbe lays out what Shlichus has been, what Shlichus is, and what Shlichus it means for all of us, what it means for every Yid, and what it means for the world. Simcha. Let's go in. Let's get inside and let's go back.
Let's get into it. That was very well said. Okay, so the Sikha started off what we spoke last week. The Rebbe is talking to all the Shluchim. It's the last Kiddush of Shluchim where we heard the Rebbe address the Shluchim, and the Rebbe starts off that we're introducing an entirely new thing into Shlichus, and that's this idea of Kabbalah's Pnei Moshiach. And that's where it's at now. Now that we finished everything, we finished all the Avodah, we're actually standing ready to greet Moshiach. That is the remaining thing in the Shlichus, to actually greet Moshiach. Then the Rebbe spends the entire middle of the Sikha discussing the history of Shlichus. I'm not going to get too into it, but the Rebbe speaks about the very first Shlichus in the Torah, which is the Shlichus of Eliezer to make a shidduch for Yitzchak and Rivka. And in that story, the Rebbe talks about an amazing thing that Avram gave Kol Ashaloi to Yitzchak. Avram gave every single thing that he had. He wrote down in a star and he said, I'm giving it to you to go find the shidduch. Whoever's going to find the shidduch, I'm letting you know that Yitzchak has all of my possessions. And Avram was quite a rich man, so which made Yitzchak would make a good husband. He had a lot of money. And the Rebbe asks, how could Avram do that? That's not responsible. There's nothing that we know from Torah that would say that's an okay thing to do. And the Rebbe answers that you have to understand what's really going on with the Shlichus. This was no small thing. This was the whole point of Judaism, of the creation of the world, was all this. And the Rebbe talks in Kabbalistic terms of the idea of it was a connection of Ma and Ban, of, Neshama and Guf, like Kosten to Welt, this whole male and female coming together type of situation. And the very first time this was happening in a real way was this Yitzchak and Rivka. And because this was going to be the whole progeny of the Jewish people was coming from this match, and Avram was all about Yiddishkeit, it was about the Yidden, this was Avram's everything. So there was no part of him he couldn't put into Yiddishkeit. There was no part of him that he couldn't invest into this marriage. Every part of Avram was fully invested into this marriage, and that's why he gave Kol Shalai. And the Rebbe explains what a Shliach is. A Shliach is two things. He is on one hand totally bottled to the Shliach. He has to be entirely nullified to his the one sending him, otherwise he's not a Shliach. On the other hand, he has to think for himself, like you see by Eliezer. Eliezer had to figure out all the steps of what to do for himself, and it's the same thing with a Shliach. A Shliach has to, a Shliach is bottled to the Rebbe in Gansen. On the other hand, he has to figure out exactly what to do all by himself, with the Rebbe's help and encouragement, but it's on him. That's because that's the same Ma'aban the Shliach himself has, that he is both, has a masculine side and a feminine side. He has both of these things together. And the Rebbe explains that Moshiach himself is a Shliach. Moshe Rabbeinu says, Shlach Nabi Atishlach, don't send me to take the Yidden out of Galus. I'm not the one. I'm not going to be the one to take the Yidden out of Galus anyway, so why send me to take the Yidden out of Mitzrayim? Moshe tells Hashem by the burning bush, Shlach Nabi Atishlach, send already Moshiach, because he's going to be the one to finish the job. And from there, the Rebbe learns that Moshiach is called a Shliach, because Moshiach himself has this idea of Ma'aban, and that's really the whole idea. So the Rebbe ends off this discussion and says that every Yid is really a Shliach, or at least every Yid has the Avodah, they're in Golus throughout all these years. And because the whole point of it is to bring Moshiach, which is the ultimate union of Ma and Ban, says the Rebbe, therefore, in the tire of Avodah of every Yid throughout all of his life needs to be totally permeated with the idea of, with the Ein and Eitzik and the Kodeh Tzvek, the Gilei from Moshiach Tzekenu, the revelation of Moshiach Tzekenu, which says the Rebbe, that is the Shleimus in the Shlichus, Yichud Ma'aban, that's the whole point. So that is normative Judaism throughout all of history, the way the Rebbe is explaining it here. But then the Rebbe doesn't stop there, obviously. And the Rebbe goes back to what he was talking at the beginning of the Farbrengen, beginning of the Sikha. Let's get a little bit closer to home, says the Rebbe. Let's talk about what's going on in more recent generations, some recent developments over the past 50 years. And says the Rebbe, this is coming to a head right now, particularly in our generation. That there was a chiddush that the Frierdiker Rebbe says that, and we know in the Rebbe, we spoke previously, very often when the Rebbe spoke about the Frierdiker Rebbe, he was referring to the Nasi Adar, which the Rebbe was at the Rebbe is obviously the Nasi Adar. And here the Rebbe says something I find absolutely fascinating. The Rebbe says that the Frierdiker Rebbe, the Nasi Adar, appointed, he was mamane every single yid in the entire generation as his Shliach. So straight off the bat, that's a wow statement, if we may say so. You might think, oh, okay, all the Lubavitchers are shluchim. A shliach means that the Rebbe sent you. He sent you to do a shlichus. It's not just a term we throw around. And the Rebbe is saying he appointed every single yid as a shliach. I mean, I find that fascinating. Every yid is not only does every yid have a shaykhus to the Rebbe, every yid, and not just like shluchim of the Hashem to do that avodah, shluchim of the Rebbe. So, I mean, wow. But says the Rebbe, and here the Rebbe defines what the Shlichus was, all the years of the Nesias. And this is also, I think, very, very important. That's a good question. I'm a Lubavitcher. I'm a Shliach. Of course, I'm a Lubavitcher. Of course I do Shlichus. Right? What, what exactly is Shlichus? So here's the Rebbe's definition. He's a Shliach. Every year there's a Shliach in Afotus HaTorah, spreading Torah, Vayados, and spreading Judaism. And a focus on the Chutzland to spread the wellsprings of Chassidus outward. To what extent, says the Rebbe, biz to bring in the Gula Mitzvah Shlema. You have to spread Torah and Judaism and Chassidus until, and this is always the whole point, till you actually bring the Gula. That's also part of the Shlichus, till you actually bring the Gula. Okay, that's Shlichus. Then the Rebbe continues and says that you see now that it becomes easier to explain to a Yid that seemingly doesn't have any connection to Shlichus, that he has an obligation to be a Shliach. You might say, oh, my Rebbe says that every single Yid has the ability and the obligation. People understand now, Taka, I have a Shliach, it's very popular. You see, everyone's an influencer. There's the Rebbe, that's the whole Nakoda. Everyone can influence their family, their friends, their circle. Everybody has an influence. You can post a WhatsApp status. You can post, everyone has, that doesn't talk about WhatsApp, obviously, but everyone has a sphere of influence. Says the Rebbe, that's everybody. But then in particular, there are those special people who they were chosen to actually, they chose to actually spend their entire lives, be totally dedicated to the Rebbe, to the Nasi Adar, the entire Avodah, 24 hours, 24/7, without any breaks, to spread Torah, Judaism, and Chassidus, and bring the Geula. And the Rebbe then again reiterates that that's the Shlichus, to spread Torah, Judaism, Chassidus, and bring the Geula. And those are Shluchim. And says the Rebbe, that's so amazing. Yeah.
So the distinction the Rebbe makes, I guess, between Yidden in general, because it's a, like you said, it's a pretty shocking statement, like pretty groundbreaking that the Rebbe says that every single Yid, right? We think, everybody is a Shliach. Like we say that as like a nice, cute vart. But here the Rebbe is saying that no, the Frierdiker Rebbe appointed every single Jew in the generation to be a shliach in these very things. And then the Rebbe says, and then you have shluchim that, I guess, so what I guess, can you explain the difference, I guess, between being appointed a shliach by the Frierdiker Rebbe or by the Nasi Adar and a shliach, the way the Rebbe explains it as kol avedasam, that their entire aveda is to be a shliach?
Seemingly, you might just say it's a difference in Kamos, that you have, they spend more time being a shliach, they're on the call 24/7. That's the whole, they've dedicated their whole life to this. But we've heard from the Rebbe so many times that when you have a lot of Kamos, it also equals more echos. And certainly you cannot compare when a person who's a shliach, that's his whole life is that he's a shliach, that takes over his entire identity. similar to what we spoke earlier in the Sikha about Avram, that there was no part of him that he wasn't dedicating to the Shlichus. There was no part of him that wasn't dedicated to Yiddishkeit, to his progeny, to Yitzchak, that he should get married and have children and build Klal Yisrael. It's the same thing with a Shliach. A Shliach who's a bona fide Shliach, you might say, there's no part of him that's not that he's a Shliach of the Rebbe. That's obviously an amazing cost, an amazing thing, and as we'll see clearly in the Sikha, those are the main guys on the front lines. That it's up to them to really make it happen, to really bring the Geula, because part of being a Shliach, says the Rebbe, part of the job description is to bring the Geula. that's that's the Rebbe's defining as part of the Shlichus, just as much as spreading Torah is what's my job is to spread Torah, but part of it is your job is to bring the Gula.
Right.
So it's really up to them, and mainly, whereas other people might look at it as a side job, or when they get an opportunity, they also do shlichus. It's a whole different thing if that's who you are. You're not a businessman. You're not a this. You're not a that. I'm a shliach of the Rebbe. It's your whole identity. That's and being that the Rebbe is giving so much credence to the idea of a shliach, that it's only a shliach because he himself has Ma'am Ban, that he's able to bring the Geula, which is the idea of Ma'am Ban. He's able to bring Moshiach, who is himself a shliach. So obviously, it's specifically the shluchim, people who are entirely dedicated to being a shliach. They have this unique and special ability, more so than people who are not full-time shluchim, to bring the Geula. It's an amazing source. It's an amazing responsibility.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, I'm looking at the Sikha now, and it's very interesting when the Rebbe, right after the Rebbe says how everybody is a shliach, the Rebbe says that, like we see practically, that now it's easy to go over to a Jew and say that in addition to your own avodah, you also have the obligation, the responsibility to be a shliach, and that wherever you go, where you have a circle of influence, that is, you have an obligation, you have a responsibility to influence them towards this goal. And interesting, when I was thinking about this, I was thinking that what's the difference between a shliach and what the Rebbe says that every Yid is a shliach? You could say that, what's a shliach? A shliach is someone who goes to some random far-off place in Bangkok, Thailand, or Dubai, or whatever it is, and he's a shliach. That's his entire 24/7. He wakes up, he goes to sleep, he eats, he breathes, he davens as a shliach. Because that's where he is. There's no other thing but doing that very thing that he was sent to do. But someone who, for example, goes to business, he's not the same type of shliach, right? We have this in our minds. I know a few people where they feel sixth-class citizens. I'm not a shliach, so I'm not the
Right,
best.
it's like
I'm
a
not
stigma.
a great
You
chassid.
have to right.
Correct.
The
You
whole
have to
system
be a shliach.
is training you to be a shliach, and otherwise you failed.
So the Rebbe is saying not only is every Yid is a shliach, but what's the difference between every Yid being a shliach and then those special people that got the shlichus, is that those special people that were appointed to be shluchim, and what does it mean? It means their entire avodah, when they daven, when they learn all these things, whatever they're doing for themselves, is to be a shliach. However, as opposed to those regular people, the people that are not shluchim, doesn't mean that you're supposed to be a businessman. No, it means that your own avodah, you have your avodah with yourself. You learn, you daven, you do zbeinunos before davening, and you should spend time on yourself. You work on yourself, right? The whole, for many, many years, Judaism, Chassidus was to work on yourself. And
Yeah.
that is something that I've been saying. Your average Yid has their own avodah with themselves, and the Rebbe is saying that the Frierdiker Rebbe, now, in addition to your own avodah, now you have also a responsibility to go out and influence other people. And I think that's very interesting. I think that's very nice, because it doesn't mean that you have to, that if either you go to a community or you go to business.
Right, it's not all or nothing. You can have, so to
It's
speak,
not all or
your
nothing.
life with your avodah, and there can also be part of you, and you can still have this aspect of you that's a shliach. That's for everyone.
Correct.
Yeah, right.
Everybody is a
Yeah,
shliach.
it's amazingly empowering. So, okay.
Now,
So
what's the
then the Rebbe,
shlichus?
what's the shlichus? So here we said, Torah, spreading Torah, Judaism, Chassidus, and bringing the Gula. Then the Rebbe continues and talks that certainly when you have shluchim, right, by the Kines of Shluchim, what's the Kines of Shluchim? You have shluchim from all over, international Kines of Shluchim, shluchim from literally all over the world. It's an amazing, amazing situation. And that brings, the Rebbe says, enough for them, enough for the whole world, and even a world that's lush and helam, even such a dark world, kinnis of all these people is an amazing, amazing thing. You have the power to make a deal for the Ebershter, to make this Yichud Ma'aban, and which is the Chana for the Gula. Okay, so making the deal for this world is a Chana that the Ebershter can actually be here to have the Gula. Fantastic. Says the Rebbe, that's all in general. That's all any old random kinnis hashluchim from a regular year. But says the Rebbe, right now, particularly this year, is even more special than a regular kinnis hashluchim. So far we have all of Yiddishkeit, then we have Der Shvi, then we have the kinnis hashluchim, and now the kinnis hashluchim of this year in particular. The Rebbe continues and says there's a special connection this year. This year by the kinnis, there's a special connection, a chiddush, between the connection between Shlichus, the Avodah of Shlichus, and Shlach Nabiat Tishlach. There's a special connection between the Shluchim who, in general, and the Shlichus of Moshiach Tzidkenu, says the Rebbe. Shlach Nabiat Tishlach, says the Rebbe. That's the Shlichus of Moshiach Tzidkenu. And in this year in particular, there's a special connection between the Shlichus of Moshiach Tzidkenu and the Kins of Shluch. So the Rebbe says, well, how so? What's this special connection, particularly this year? I mean, you said the whole point of Yiddishkeit was to bring Moshiach. And the whole point of Shlichus is to bring the Geula. And the whole point, the whole Derech Shvi is to bring the Geula. So what's special now? Now, says the Rebbe, there's the Chiddush, it's not just the Geula, it's particularly connected with the Shlichus of Moshiach Tzidkenu himself. Let's see. So the Rebbe says, we spoke earlier, says the Rebbe, the beginning of the Sikha, how we already finished, we have the testimony of the Nasi Adara, we finished all the Avodah, and we're standing ready in Duhachim Kulchen to actually greet Moshiach. We're ready for the Geula. We finished all the Avodah of Golos. And then the Rebbe spoke about all the events going on in the world. The Rebbe quoted the famous Dr. Shemani that the Rebbe spoke about the whole Aleph, about the Gulf War, the Malchus, Mizgad, Zayim Zay, the Medinas Arvi, and then the Rebbe spoke about some politics going on at the time. I'm not sure what the Rebbe was talking about. The Rebbe says there was Loy Dum Loyad, and that was also another sign of Mashiach. I'm not sure exactly what the situation was. Then the Rebbe spoke about the year, that it's Tafshin, we're coming off of the year Tafshin Aleph, Ishnas Nefloy, so then we're going to show you wonders, and now we're continuing into the year of Nefloy Spa, and on the Nefloy, so the whole Neshama of the year, so it's mamash a special year as far as Mashiach is concerned. And here again, the Rebbe says something that is absolutely tremendous. And there was we know the Rambam gives qualifications for who's Mashiach. How do you know? So to speak, a job description, if you will. And the Rambam describes that a Mashiach has to be a Melech and Beis David, Mizar Shlomo, Hege B'Teirav V'Eisik Mitzvahs Kedavid Aviv, and he has to be one of the things he has to do is Yilcham Al Hashem. He has to fight the wars of Hashem. Which there could be different ways of understanding exactly what that means, as we'll see in a second. So the Rebbe says Mashiach, the Rambam says Mashiach is Yilcham Al Hashem, and such a person, if he breaches the defenses of Yiddishkeit, Mechazik Bidka, all these things, that such a person, such a king, that's the job of a good regular king, and he is V'chat Kashu Mashiach. Then the Rambam continues and says, if Mashiach was successful in doing all these things, it's Kai, and so to speak, he actually wins the wars, etc. And then he builds the base of Mikdash, and Mekabah Sitzli So brings all the into the So, then he's Mashiach Bavadai. That's the Rambam's description of Mashiach. So here the Rebbe says, Mizet B'Poil, you see clearly that it's Gvarin Unizvert, that it was and it is, right now happening, the Yilcham Chametz Hashem. You see how Mashiach is fighting the wars of Hashem, V'inatzech, and he's winning them. the Kaaba and Yon, and the Mashiach is actually fighting the wars of Hashem. So there's somebody, Mashiach, says the Rebbe, he's fighting the wars of Hashem, and he's winning these wars, and says the Rebbe, it's dafka matech Melchama Shalom. You might think it's a physical war with swords and guns or whatever. Says the Rebbe, it's Melchama Shalom. It's a type of war where it's a peaceful war. The enemy is so scared they run off. It's a peaceful war. Mashiach is fighting wars and he's winning the wars. And I think that's absolutely fascinating statement. People always wonder, did the Rebbe ever say that the Mashiach is here? Did the Rebbe say that he's Mashiach or all these things? Here the Rebbe is telling us there is a person, Melech HaMashiach, or there's somebody who's doing what the Rambam says, Yilcham Melchamas Hashem, that he's fighting the wars of Hashem, and not only that, he's winning the wars. So clearly, Melech HaMashiach is on the scene, doing the things Melech HaMashiach is supposed to do. Then the Rebbe continued, spoke about the specialness of the year, that the word Netzach, that he's winning the wars, Netzach is the Gilei Sharanun, and Tzaddik is Shnat Tzaddik, the Rebbe was 90, the 90th year, and which is connected with the Gilei of Moshiach Tzidkenu. Okay, and this is all leading up to why this Kinnis of Shluchim is specifically connected with the Shlichus of Melech HaMashiach. I don't know, Levi, tell me what you think. People sometimes wonder, like, is it just a random ha'ara that the Rebbe hinted this thing or that thing, or is it here you have a whole sikha literally dedicated to talking about these things, how Mashiach is here. And this is a major address to all the shluchim. So this sikha, like I spoke in last week's podcast, it's so important to learn. It's so important to know exactly what's going on over here. This is fundamental. It's so important.
Yeah,
Okay,
I think it's very easy to confuse this with saying it as like something hopeful, but it's not.
right.
The Rebbe is
It's
saying
not a bracha. Yeah,
what's happening. The Rebbe is saying what's happening really, what's happening right now. This is where we are. This is what's happening right now. Mashiach, the Geula we earned. Now we're up to Mashiach. Now we're up to Mashiach Tzidkenu. Now it seems to be that this is what we need to do now. What we need to do now is Kabbalas Pnei Mashiach Tzidkenu. We're standing here by the Kinnos HaShluchim. We know what Shlichus is about. Shlichus is about doing Afatzas HaTorah, spreading Torah, Judaism, Chassidus, until we reach the Geula. That's the goal. The goal is to reach the Geula. And the Rebbe is saying that now that we have the Geula, and now we already have this concept of Mashiach Tzidkenu. Like we said at the beginning of the Sikha, the Rebbe said how the testimony of the Frierdiker Rebbe that in the Hochel Kuchem we already have to receive to Mekabel Pnei Mashiach Tzidkenu. All these things that's the reality, that this is what we need to do right now.
It's and so many sikhs, and you have sometimes you hear people say when you talk a sikh on an aleph or an beis, and they tell you, well, why are you learning aleph and beis? Why don't you learn a sikh for well, did you finish the rest of the Likutei Sichos? Well, what's wrong with the rest of the Likutei Sichos? This obviously the whole Likutei Sichos is Tiras Hashem Melech HaMashiach. The whole thing is fantastic, obviously. There's no shaila, and everyone learns sikhs, and it's very important. But you have to realize in these sikhs and aleph and beis, you look at it, you see the Rebbe is laying out the whole new shlichus. The Rebbe is talking to all the shluchim. He's telling them fundamental things about exactly what they should be doing, and what exactly the job description is, and how we're coming in Chiddush now, and there's a new shlichus now. Mashiach is here. He's taking us out of Galus. There are things happening. To go pretend like it's the same like learning a Rashi Sikha, which is very important to learn a Rashi Sikha, but you need to know what the Shlichus is. You need to know what the job is. If the job is to bring the Geula, you've got to know how to do it. And the way you know how to do it is by learning the Sikhs on the topic. So, yeah, I guess it's important to learn the Sikhs, listen to this podcast, other shiurim on the subject. People should listen to this. They should tell their friends, like we learned in the Sikha, that everyone has the power to influence. Everyone has the power to has the obligation to influence people. So everyone's got to learn Mashiach Gula, to like, share, and subscribe. Yeah, it's the most important thing. The Rebbe says this is the derech achi kala v'yeshara. This is the easiest and fastest way to bring the Gula to learn about it. And like anything else
I
that you cared about, if there was something you cared about, you would learn how to do it. So too it is with Moshiach. If this is something we care about, we need to learn how to get it done and not be scared, and not be embarrassed, and not shy away from it. You have questions, ask, but it's so very important to find out and learn.
ועד כדי כך המדב גולהוב der עם soll nachri sein, Yechi המלך.